Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth with your host, the Green Bard. This is the Direwolves of Winterfell, episode 6-16, Daggers in the Dark, The Lone Wolf Dies, covering Jon and Ghost in their final chapters in A Dance with Dragons. A Dance with Dragons, Jon 8. He seems to be dreaming inside ghosts a lot, given passages like what follows, although the author cleverly hides it by only mentioning Ghost's actions in the dreams, but not mentioning the dreams themselves. How else would Jon know how far he goes to hunt? Unfortunately, Ghost goes too far to hunt, which means he's not around to guard Jon for large patches of time. This is, not good. Bad things. It was still dark when Jon returned to his chambers behind the armory. Ghost was not back yet, he saw. Still hunting. The big white direwolf was gone more often than not of late, ranging farther and farther in search of prey. Between the men of the watch and the wildlings down in Molestown, the hills and fields near Castle Black had been hunted clean, and there had been little enough game to begin with. Winter is coming, Jon reflected. And soon, too soon, he wondered if they would ever see a spring. A Dance with Dragons, Jon 10. Ghost is shadowing Jon when he greets Selyse, who dislikes Ghost, which may be important later. Doubtless, she heard the rumors that he is a warg at Eastwatch, and all sorts of other slander. Before that, Ghost is shadowing Jon. Jon crossed to Queen Selyse, with Ghost beside him, his boots crunched through piles of old snow. Later, the Queen glanced at Ghost suspiciously. To be sure, Lady Melisandre knows the way. Melisandre again urges him to keep the wolf close. Clearly, she is not of a mind with the Queen on the value of the wolf. Jon brushes her off, saying he's always around. We know, however, from the last several chapters that is untrue. Jon is in denial of the danger himself, despite his immediate predecessor being killed by his own men. You would do well to keep your wolf beside you, my lord. Ghost is seldom far. The direwolf raised his head at the sound of his name. Jon scratched him behind the ears. But now you must excuse me, Ghost, with me. Later. The music and the laughter died at once. Dancers froze in place, listening. Even Ghost pricked up his ears. Did you hear that? Queen Selyse asked her knights. Looking back at that passage, I wonder if Jon heard the horn through Ghost's ears instead of his own. If George intended to imply that, after all the sharing of senses in the last few chapters, it would be very subtle writing to just mention the wolf's ears here in passing. A Dance with Dragons, Jon 11. In the next passage, Ghost runs off when the wildlings come to negotiate the passage through the wall. Clearly he senses no threat from them. Jon even thinks he doesn't need any protection but him. True enough, Jon can definitely trust him, at least when their minds are melded. And Ghost trusts Val, given how he arrives back with her. Jon's silent comparison between them is interesting, and their flirtation reflects Ghost's easiness with the woman. This underscores her importance in the Winds of Winter scenes that will come, when Jon's consciousness will be inside Ghost. Gareth and Leathers were the only men Jon had brought with him to the parley. Any more might have been seen as a sign of fear, and 20 men would have been no more use than 2 if Tormund had been intent on blood. Ghost was the only protection Jon needed. The direwolf could sniff out foes, even those who hid their enmity behind smiles. Ghost was gone, though. Jon peeled off one black glove, put 2 fingers in his mouth, and whistled, "Ghost, to me!" From above came the sudden sound of wings. Mormont's raven flapped from a limb of an old oak to perch upon Jon's saddle. "Corn!" it cried. "Corn, corn, corn!" "Did you follow me as well?" Jon reached to shoo the bird away, but ended up stroking its feathers. The raven cocked its eye at him. "Snow!" it muttered, bobbing its head knowingly. Then Ghost emerged from between 2 trees, with Val beside him. They look as though they belonged together. Val was clad all in white woolen breeches tucked into high boots of bleached white leather, white bearskin cloak pinned at the shoulder with a carved weirwood face, white tunic with bone fastenings. Her breath was white as well, but her eyes were blue, her long braid the color of dark honey, her cheeks flushed red from the cold. It had been a long while since Jon Snow had seen a sight so lovely. "Have you been trying to steal my wolf?" he asked her. "Why not? If every woman had a direwolf, Men would be much sweeter, even crows.
Next, we revert to two of our direwolf themes. Jon has an affectionate moment with Ghost. We can imagine that his senses are augmented through the bond during this, as he continues to converse with Val. Then, as they ride back to Castle Black, Ghost resumes his role as sentry. This probably indicates a higher threat level in the castle.
As Jon scratched Ghost behind the ear, Torreg brought up Val's horse for her. She still rode the gray Garen that Mully had given her the day she left the wall, a shaggy, stunted thing, blind in one eye. As she turned it toward the wall, she asked, "How fares the little monster?"
Later that chapter.
They rode the rest of the way in silence, Ghost lopping at their heels. Mormont's raven followed them as far as the gate, then flapped upward as the rest of them dismounted.
Earlier, I mentioned that Selyse mislikes Ghost. This becomes a threat in the next passage, as her guards forbid him to be in her presence. Ghost is separated from Jon because of it. He is then missing again, probably hunting when Jon returns, compounding the danger.
Sir Patrick sent one of the men-at-arms scrambling up the steps to inquire as to whether her grace would receive them. "The wolf stays here, though," Sir Patrick insisted. Jon had expected that. The direwolf made Queen Selyse anxious, almost as much as one wagged one dar one. "Ghost, stay."
Later that chapter.
Ghost was gone again. The sun was low in the west. A cup of hot spiced wine would serve me well just now. 2 cups would serve me even better. But that would have to wait. He had foes to face. Foes of the worst sort. Brothers.
I'll put a bow on my thoughts for this chapter with a tinfoil alert. In the coming interactions with Val in The Winds of Winter, and also in the scene we just reviewed, let's not underestimate the significance of Ghost's power to reach out telepathically. We saw it in his first scene in A Game of Thrones, and we saw it in A Clash of Kings in the Wolf Dream, and when Ghost went up the hill in a storm of swords before Jon crosses the wall. We've also seen many instances of Ghost projecting feelings, especially hunger. I think it possible that he/Jon will use the connection to Val and maybe Mel in the coming crisis to call them to him. A Dance with Dragons, Jon 12. Separation. That is the elephant in the room. Given the evidence of the threat at Castle Black, the risk every time they are separated is now critical. Ghost was separated from Jon for 2 different reasons in the prior chapter, Selyse and hunting. They can also be separated at Jon's whim or by manipulation by his brothers. Then, in the next chapter, we add one more reason for them to be separated, the threat of a clash between Ghost and the boar belonging to Baroque, the skin-changer. Combined, these reasons for separation eventually hit a breaking point, spelling disaster, as our direwolf theme has predicted all along. Well, it was developed in hindsight, but still. Before the boar arrives, though, Jon gives Tormund a bit more reason to respect him, theatrically calling Ghost and spooking the big man's horse. The episode requires coordination from Ghost, which their tight bond enables. The boar appears a bit later, twice Ghost's size, and a true threat. It's too bad that Jon didn't trust his bond with Ghost enough to forego the entanglement. If he had, Ghost would have obeyed Jon solely based upon Jon's force of will. Same for the boar. No rope needed. Our author had other plans, though. He has Jon agree to tie Ghost up. Big mistake.
That is a lesson I would soon they never learned. Jon peeled the glove off his burnt hand. He put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled. Ghost came racing from the gate. Tormund's horse shied so hard that the wildling almost lost his saddle. "Not to be feared?" Jon said. "Ghost, stay."
Later that chapter.
Amongst the riders came one man afoot, with some big beast trotting at his heels. A boar, Jon saw. A monstrous boar, twice the size of Ghost. The creature was covered with coarse black hair, with tusks as long as a man's arm. Jon had never seen a boar so huge or ugly. The man beside him was no beauty either. Hulking, black-browed, he had a flat nose, heavy jowls, dark with stubble, small black, close-set eyes. "Borak," Tormund turned his head and spat. A skin-changer. It was not a question. Somehow he knew. Ghost turned his head. The falling snow had masked the boar's scent, but now the white wolf had the smell. He padded out in front of Jon, his teeth bared in a silent snarl. "No," Jon snapped. "Ghost, down, stay, stay." "Boars and wolves," said Tormund. "Best keep that beast of yours locked up tonight. I'll see that Borak does the same with his pig." He glanced up at the darkening sky. Them's the last, and none too soon. It's going to snow all night. I feel it. Time I had a look at what's on t'other side of all that ice.
Looking back at the passage, if Ghost were going to attack the beast, he would have done it right there and then. He didn't. He instead adopted a defensive posture so as to protect Jon, nothing more. He wasn't aggressive beyond a projection of strength in his snarl, showing the beast that he is a threat too. Jon should have taken the clue here and maintained Ghost as a constant presence, in accordance with Mel's repeated advice. Unfortunately, he followed Tormund's terrible advice instead. A Dance with Dragons, Jon 13. As we see in the next scene, Melisandre is apoplectic about Jon's ideas about Ghost and the boar, but unfortunately his mind is made up, and Ghost remains tied up, both because of the boar and Selyse.
It is those duties I would speak of. She made her way down, the hem of her scarlet skirts swishing over the steps. It almost seemed as if she floated. Where is your direwolf? Asleep in my chambers. Her grace does not allow Ghost in her presence. She claims he scares the princess. And so long as Baroque and his boar are about, I dare not let him loose.
Later.
That thing is the size of a bull, with tusks as long as swords. Ghost would go after him if he were loose, and one or both of them would not survive the meeting. Baroque is the least of your concerns, this ranging.
In the following scene, Ghost gives anyone with eyes a huge clue that he senses mortal danger to Jon. His behavior to Molly, and then Bowen and Othel, is beyond anything we've ever seen from him. Jon, blind, doesn't see it. It is weird how he can't feel the truth through the bond. He still blames Ghost's agitation on the boar. In Jon's defense, he probably knows for sure, through the bond, that Ghost truly can smell the boar. But I don't believe for a minute that this is the reason he attacked Molly or threatened Marsh/Yarwick. The only satisfying explanation is that Molly and Bowen, at least, were in on the plot to assassinate Jon. Jon even thinks how much he needs better men than these, but still doesn't recognize the threats they pose. Even the Raven is freaked out, showing the lie to Jon's thoughts. It all adds up to Jon being unable to think clearly and causing him to ask for mulled wine. Sadly, it seems that Clytus has been brewing very strong, or potentially narcotic-laced, wine. See Preston Jacobs' Daggers for Jon theory on this. So Jon's senses and wits seem to steadily degrade through the rest of the chapter. I do wonder if Jon's use of Clytus's mulled wine is partly so that he can dull the bond to Ghost and the heightened senses that go along with it. I admit that when I learned as a kid how much better hearing and sense of smell canines have, I wondered how they process all the extra information. It would be no easy task for the human mind to sort through it all. Perhaps that's why Jon self-medicates. Or maybe Clytus is medicating him on purpose.
Molly agreed. He tried to take a bite of me, he did. Ghost. Jon was shocked. Unless your lordship has some other white wolf, I never seen him like this, my lord. All wild-like, I mean. He was not wrong, as Jon discovered for himself when he slipped inside the doors. The big white direwolf would not lie still. He paced from one end of the armory to the other, past the cold forge and back again. Easy, Ghost, Jon called. Down. Sit. Ghost, down. Yet when he made to touch him, the wolf bristled and bared his teeth. It's that bloody boar. Even in here, Ghost can smell his stink. Mormont's raven seemed agitated too. Snow! The bird kept screaming. Snow! 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 Jon shoot him off, had Satin start a fire, then sent him out after Bowen Marsh and Othel Yarwick. Bring a flagon of mulled wine as well.
Later that chapter.
Satin helped them back into their cloaks. As they walked through the armory, Ghost sniffed at them, his tail upraised and bristling. My brothers. The Night's Watch needed leaders with the wisdom of Maester Aemon, the learning of Samwell Tarly, the courage of Corin Halfhand, the stubborn strength of the Old Bear, the compassion of Donald Noy. What it had instead was them.
After the meeting, Jon makes his fateful and final decision to separate himself from Ghost again. And he has to do it bodily. Ghost is determined to protect Jon. His disobedience is a dead giveaway that something is gravely wrong. Ghost can take some solace from Ned's words to Ser Barristan. He can't protect Jon from himself. Jon is still thinking about the stupid boar, the one Mel said was the least of his concerns. Jon's logic is just wrong here. Why should the Lord Commander sequester his wolf for the sake of a wildling of no special account? Is he drunk?
Horse and Rory had replaced Fulk and Molly at the armory door with the change of watch. With me, Jon told them, when the time came. Ghost would have followed as well, but as the wolf came padding after them, Jon grabbed him by the scruff of his neck and wrestled him back inside. Borak would be amongst those gathering at the shield hall. The last thing he needed just now was his wolf savaging the skinchanger's boar.
No, Jon, the last thing you need is to be stabbed to death. But that happens after said meeting in the shield hall. When Bowen Marsh predictably stabbed Jon, I must admit that my first thought was that he fell to the same mistakes that Robb did. He ignored his wolf after making a botch of politics around him and paid the price. Also like Robb, his last words were his wolf's name. Ghost. We discussed in part 2-4 how I think that as Robb's body died, his consciousness started to flow into his direwolf, right around the time Robb uttered Grey Wind. I feel the same happens in this scene, with Jon's consciousness flowing into Ghost.
Away, he meant to say. When Wick Whittlestick slashed at his throat, the word turned into a grunt. Jon twisted from the knife, just enough so it barely grazed his skin. He cut me. When he put his hand to the side of his neck, blood welled between his fingers. Why? For the watch. Wick slashed at him again. This time Jon caught his wrist and bent his arm back until he dropped the dagger. The gangling steward backed away, his hands upraised as if to say, "Not me! It was not me!" Men were screaming. Jon reached for Longclaw, but his fingers had grown stiff and clumsy. Somehow he could not seem to get his sword free of its scabbard. Then Bowen Marsh stood there before him, tears running down his cheeks. For the watch. He punched Jon in the belly. When he pulled his hand away, the dagger stayed where he had buried it. Jon fell to his knees. He found the dagger's hilt and wrenched it free. In the cold night, the wound was smoking. "Ghost," he whispered. "Stick them with the pointy end." When the third dagger took him between the shoulder blades, he gave a grunt and fell face first into the snow. He never felt the fourth knife, only the cold.
This is the end of our interactions with Ghost and Jon in the published work. Next time, we'll turn to what everyone seems to think will happen in The Winds of Winter, Jon starting his second life inside Ghost and eventually being resurrected into his own body again. I have many thoughts, and I look forward to sharing them in the final video of The Direwolves of Winterfell.